Good day to all of you. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Digital Marketing to Reach Doctors Now and After COVID-19. My name is Kyle Hojum. I am the marketing manager here at Healthcare Success. And without further ado, I'd like to present to you the CEO of Healthcare Success, Stewart Gandolf, and Stewart will be doing our webinar today. Stewart, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Kyle. How are you? Okay, so yes, I'm Stewart Gandolf. I'm really excited today to be presenting this webinar. It's really interesting. This topic of reaching doctors during COVID is a big deal. And some of you may have recognized when I sent out my invitation emails, this webinar was inspired by a real story of a client calling me up with a large multi-state home health business. And essentially, their referrals had dropped through the floor because their business developers who are used to being out meeting doctors and hospital staff face-to-face were precluded from doing so in the era of COVID-19. So I thought, while we normally spend a lot of our time educating people on how to attract patients, today I thought I would educate and talk more about how can you reach doctors through COVID-19 era, now and then afterwards, and then digital marketing being a key part of that. For my part, I'm Chief Executive Officer, as Kyle mentioned. Done a lot of speaking, as some of you have probably already seen me speak. Most of you have read my blog. I've been doing this for over 20 years. Really have worked with that many clients, if you can imagine, and I went back and figured it out. And more importantly, I'm the team leader of a 30-person ad agency, or a digital and traditional agency, branding. In California, we work nationwide with hospitals, practices of all sides, mostly enterprise, but smaller ones too, health plans, pharma, and device. So I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with you today. Before I begin, I don't think anybody can really have a conversation that is meaningful in this era without acknowledging where we really are. So first of all, thank you to our caregivers who are on the front lines. I really appreciate you, as I'm sure our attendees do as well. Very difficult time in our country's history, and you're risking your lives to help us. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. For the rest of us, remember that we are living in a historic pandemic. This is a big deal. So therefore, work really hard to protect yourself and your loved ones. That's critical. Do what you can to help and take this. Obviously, most of the people on this call are from healthcare, so chances are you're taking COVID-19 very seriously. And obviously not everybody in our country is currently. And just remember that how we act today will be remembered and reverberate tomorrow. So again, thank you to our caregivers. Let's all work together to help defeat this pretty dread disease. So the challenges I mentioned earlier, this was a real life story, and this is common with a lot of our clients in addiction or pharma or skilled nursing or practices or whatever, is that so many of these businesses are built around meeting doctors and executives face to face. So with these social distancing and stay-at-home orders and practice closures that are precluding face-to-face access, obviously that's made a whole new ballgame. Also, this is a moving target. Like, for example, today, as we're speaking, Georgia is about to relax the stay-at-home orders. South Carolina already has. But it's going to be a while before people rush back to have face-to-face the way they did before, even in those states. And certainly other states are still social distancing. I read yesterday that roughly 2/3 of people, despite what their state government says, are going to continue with social distancing at home. So this topic we have today is relevant for people involved in business development and physician relations, physician liaisons at the hospital level. It's relevant for the people in marketing and sales who supervise the business development reps for long-term care and addiction. It's relevant for the people that are supervising or managing the pharma reps and device reps. So the content here is not really meant for the individual reps, it's meant for the marketing people. And the idea here is to support those people in their jobs now that they can't get the face-to-face coverage they're used to. Before we go any further, I want to remind everybody that it's hard enough in COVID. If that were the only problem, it would be one thing. But it's always difficult to sell to doctors, market to doctors. First of all, remember, everybody wants to reach them. Not just, drug reps or pharma reps or hospital reps or whomever, everybody. Uh, the stockbrokers, realtors, your local golf pro. Everybody assumes that doctors have lots of money, so everybody on the planet is going after them. I'm not aware of any job profession that has more attention, overwhelmingly people trying to reach them. They're also extremely busy, as you know. And so that makes selling to doctors more difficult. They're protected by the best gatekeepers on the planet. Nobody gets a meeting with my boss unless I say so, would be the common thought process there. Reduced access today, especially on the pharma side, we're seeing these larger and institutional practices are reducing access. In the old days, when it was mom and pop, it was relatively easy to schmooze your way in, be nice to the receptionist, and work your way back. Today, between the larger businesses of healthcare and just policies, it's far more reduced. Then, of course, you've got the Sunshine Act and pharma, a lot of different things that are making it more difficult to reach doctors. A lot of doctors and people, clinicians, have a real anti-marketing and sales attitude in general. One of the things I marvel at, and I talk about to people from outside of the industry, is how in the world we in healthcare inadvertently rewarded face-to-face drop-by calling. I'm not aware of any other industry where setting up phone calls in advance to set a meeting is not encouraged. In this marketplace, it's actually encouraged to drop by. Trying to reach somebody on the phone to set an appointment is almost impossible. So indirectly and inadvertently, we have actually set up this model where people are used to accepting face-to-face cold calls cold calls as opposed to doing the more traditional thing of setting a meeting over the phone. And the other thing is, I was talking to somebody from AstraZeneca recently, and any of the leading pharma companies I've talked to, when I ask them about their own service line, do you have enough field reps, enough reps in the field? And the answer, even there at these big pharmas, is, well, geez, I wish I had more. So clearly, somebody at a hospital or practice level is going to have even bigger challenge there. And then, of course, now we have the coronavirus. So it's tough. It always has been. So, Stewart, why are we doing digital B2B marketing? And the reason why I wanted to cover that today is, again, I look at the reps as ground troops. They're, in the foxholes, they're, hand to hand, they're doing the tough work. Digital, I often talk about, is the air war. We're able to do so much faster and support the efforts on the ground. So, number one, you can uniquely reach doctors during this time, or really any other, through digital marketing. So even though the face-to-face option is tenuous at best, impossible more likely, you can reach doctors anytime, and digital is the most cost-effective way to do that. Another thing about digital is it scales well. If I create a program to reach one doctor, I can use that same program and reach 100,000. It scales really, really well. It's also easy to track and attribute. And then finally, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you can look omnipresent. You don't have to build a brand for millions of people with B2B or B2D, business to business, business to doctor. You can just need to look omnipresent to that target audience, and we'll describe that a little later. So as we get into this, I want to share with you, this is a traditional good news, bad news situation. So when I talk to people in B2B marketing, the bad news is often, hey, Stewart, I only have X thousand of prospects, right? 1,000 prospects, 5,000 prospects, 20,000, 50, or whatever the number is. That's, I can't go like B2C where Procter & Gamble can reach millions upon millions of consumers. I'm, going after a select group of ENTs. My target audience is 5,000. Great. So I understand that's limiting, but the great news is you only have 5,000 prospects or X thousand prospects, meaning that, again, in terms of cost and being efficient with your budget, you don't need to market to millions of people on TV. You just need to know how to target very precisely that target list. So for me, B2B in some ways is much easier because with B2C, you have to spend so much money. With B2B, you can target exactly who you're looking for. In particular with doctors, right? If you're especially going after medical doctors or dentists, these people all have licenses. So they are identifiable. There's no mystery as to who is and who's not a doctor. Another thing to keep in mind then, well, if that's the case, how do we reach them? And I'm going to share a lot of different ways to reach doctors throughout this webinar. But one of the mainstays is clearly still email, especially at mass. Like, so if you're calling them, great. If you're texting them on a personal basis, great. You can mail to them. But the reality is, in this survey, I just saw this again, this is new data, 2/3 of doctors prefer email for things like industry news, product updates, announcements, research, and educational opportunities. So when it comes to doctor marketing then, and any B2B really, it's all about the database. The database is the fundamental first step towards everything. You have to have a great database. So step one is to consider your in-house list of customers and prospects. Usually that's obtained directly from the providers or by your reps or by events, but we have to have our own in-house list. Secondarily, that could also include customers as well as prospects. Two, you can grow your list with inbound marketing, which we're going to discuss at length in just a little while. Three, this is really, really important. You can greatly expand your reach by licensing lists from reputable providers. That's super important and a key to being successful with B2B. And then finally, as you build a database, you need to have a CRM, a content relationship, or customer relationship management platform. So that's all these things. Again, I must stress to you that the database is the beginning of everything. You do not have to have opt-in permission to email people from a business. That is a common myth. There's a lot of people that would love that to happen, and it may happen over time. But currently, and you always have to keep on top of what the laws are, but the most important thing to remember for today's perspective is that you can email to rented lists so long as the list is a legitimate list and you stay CAN-SPAM compliant. So the first thing to consider is, what does that mean? And you can look this up, it's online, it's really easy. I'll save you some time. First of all, with CAN-SPAM, which has been around probably a decade now, you cannot have misleading headers, meaning like from fields or blind carbon copy or any of those kinds of things. And you can't have a misleading subject line. So you need to be very clear and certainly not misleading. It needs to be identified as an ad. Now, an ad means that is taken very broadly by the FTC. It just needs to know that it's not necessarily a promotional ad, but it's coming from a business is really, I'm not the attorney here, but I see lots of things. So it's not necessarily buy this today, but it needs to be clearly of some promotional nature. Even the FTC mentions that it's a pretty wide open interpretation there. It always needs a physical address, and there always needs to be an opt-out option. Another thing I alluded to a moment ago is you only want to license email lists from reputable vendors, so to protect your email service provider sender score. What that means is if you're sending out a bunch of bad lists, then you're going to get penalized, and suddenly you're going to get, well, first of all, you get a lot of bounces, but then the various entities that sort of rule the internet will block your emails. So it'll be a very wasteful effort. It's hard to come back from this if you end up with a spamming score. So you want to stick with licensed email list providers. How do you know the difference? Well, there's a few leaders out there, and we have different ones we recommend for different purposes. But generally speaking, the marketplace today is about $1-ish per name on an annual basis. So if you want 5,000 doctors, it's going to be $5,000, $5,000 to $6,000, more or less. What is not going to be a legitimate list is somebody offers to send you a list from places unknown for $500, $500,000 doctors. That's a spam list, and those lists have, there are things out there called spam traps, and that's the fastest way to ruin your sender score and to have lots and lots of problems. So I can't stress this strongly enough. If you rent a list, it is a license, you're not buying it, and go with a reputable vendor. And again, there's a number of them out there. We recommend different ones for different purposes. And even the vendors that are out there do this through getting opt-in. So they're all opt-in. They verify it to make sure the email address is a valid email address. They authenticate it, making sure that it's related to an individual. and they maintain their data. They're constantly in maintenance mode, revising their data to make sure they're providing the best possible data. So when we start thinking about our audience or your audience, the first thing to consider is, who is our best target audience? And hopefully you know that by now. What's the right specialty? Are they hospital or practice-based? What is the group size? Because that matters. Some like to work with great big practices. Some work with small ones. What's the geography? What's the sex? What's the age? What's the title? Most of the time you have an idea. These tend to be better doctors for our target list. And what we typically will see is get the universe of everybody, but we specialize or focus our time mostly on a categorization of A, B, C, D. Now, there has to be, I noticed a lot of people signed up for this webinar. We had hundreds of people signing up today. Some more at the marketing level, which is really what most of this is about today, but those of you that are actual reps that have also signed up, you can get some tips and general purposes. But this really works better at the corporate level to assist and act as an umbrella for the sales field reps efforts. Now, at the corporate level, then we typically, once we have a list, we also want to enhance that database to make it even stronger. So we look at things like, where are these doctors in their purchase life cycle? Is there any data that the reps provided to us? The marketing team should try to translate models where they can figure out personas for various doctors. So for example, some doctors are very far forward in technology and new things. Others are laggards. Claims data. You can actually get data on claims and referral patterns from various sources to find out who's doing the most, either prescribing or the most surgeries or whatever. That data is available. And then we can take these data from various sources and merge them from multiple sources into a stronger, much stronger database. And then even over time, and we'll describe this later, you can actually enhance the data still further based upon what the users do or the target doctors do online with your data. So now as we start thinking about, okay, we've got a list, how do we reach them? How do we communicate with them? Well, first of all, and this is no secret to most of the people on the line here, doctors are busy, often overwhelmed, protected by gatekeepers. They are still human beings. You have to remember that. Some are very analytical and skeptical and conservative, but they tend to be very diverse. If you know a doctor, you know a doctor. What do doctors respond to? They care a lot about what their peers think, data and facts, speaking their language. If they're in private practice, most of them are also interested in, beyond the clinical side, ethical ways to grow revenue. They're very comfortable when other people validate something. Emotions, and I'm going to share some examples of things that have worked for us over the past. Emotions work. One of the things I teach my team constantly is credibility, 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 and things that make their lives easier. These are all things that matter when reaching out to doctors. Oftentimes we think about it from a marketing point of view of what's the cycles of the doctor's journey. So are we aware of this product at all? That's a very big difference when you're marketing a new product if they're not even aware. It's a different strategy. Are they considering it? And why should I care? And then to move forward. So you can look at this model in lots of different ways, the sales funnel, the marketing funnel, but recognize that each message needs to be appropriate for wherever your doctors are, ideally on an individualized basis. So we're in the age of COVID. We have to be careful how we communicate. So some of the things that we want to think through is, okay, how do we ethically and appropriately communicate that what your doctors are going through? So some of your doctors, if you're working with doctors that are elective-based care and they're shut down in your state, they have a lot of time in their hands. They're probably looking for new ideas. A lot of doctors are finally figuring out telemedicine during this slow period. So that's a different context entirely than emergency room doctors in New York City. So you want to really think through, who are we targeting? What is their world like? Now, when I'm saying doctors today, I'm also think about executives. So, a lot of hospital executives are likewise very, very busy today. It's important to always acknowledge the reality. I don't think I've gotten into a single conversation since we went virtual, which was about a week ahead of everybody else, where we did not have a discussion about COVID-19. It's important to, this is not business as usual. You can seem out of touch. Therefore, always remember empathy and compassion. Be aware and of unintentionally coming across as exploitative. Really, really important. Always, not just today, but look to inform and educate rather than hard sell. That's always something you'll want to do, but for the age of COVID-19, it's really, really important. Done correctly, though, your marketing efforts can actually enhance your brand rather than detract from how people think about you. If you're coming across as helpful, you'll be remembered in a positive light, not in a negative light. So what are some email best practices when we think about the creative? Well, here's some tips to think through. And this is obviously there's a lot here. I can't teach you everything I know in 45 minutes plus Q&A. But first thing to think through is text versus branded HTML. Now, a lot of the larger businesses, pharmas and device need to do the branded HTML, and that can be super effective. It definitely has some advantages. Text only, or actually it's not really truly text only, but rich text, HTML, has advantages too. A lot of you that are listening today are subscribers to my blog. We've got about 21,000 subscribers. And of those subscribers, we have tested this and we have found for us, text works better. Our opens are higher, our click-throughs are higher, our engagement is higher, which is why we use text. There's a reason for that. It's not a coincidence. We used to use branded HTML. So this is just one element worthy of testing. Optimizing frequency and timing. Again, it depends a lot on where you are and what your business is. One of the things to keep in mind is if you're selling a single product line and you're a rep on an individual basis, you're not likely going to find 17 ways to talk about one service, one product, and hit them up every week or every day. So it might be more like a monthly cadence. However, if you have a situation where you've got a richer offering, a broader product line, more frequent is better. And it's funny, most people tend to underestimate the frequency. For our purposes, those of you that subscribe to my newsletter, you'll see that it's kind of weekly and a half. Once one and a half a week, sometimes 0, sometimes 2 or 3. It depends, but the cadence works for us. We know this from experience whenever we just looking at our data. The next thing is multiple links. Another thing that's key is to have multiple links in an email. And I'm going to show some examples of this in just a minute here. But multiple links can be good. Always use direct response principles. And again, I will show you some principles here in a few moments. And again, I can't stress enough to test everything. So some timely and appropriate, I mentioned be timely and appropriate. So some of the things just to share some ideas and some of the things we're doing with clients or in different ways of interacting with the public through our clients and also B2B, these are just ideas. Some addicts risk relapse due to the stress of social distancing. So there's a story there. There's a way to reach out to your providers. If you do addiction treatment with your hospital or center, there's lots of news out there about alcohol sales being through the roof. Think about something that's timely. Classically, how are we working to keep your patients safe? Maybe you sent out a blast email at the very first days of the beginning of the pandemic. Things are evolving. This is a good chance to let them know how things are evolving and how you are keeping patients safe. Skilled nursing. When should families take their loved ones home? If you're reaching out to doctors and they're hearing from concerned families, we want to let patients and families know for sure, but the providers need to know. Build thought leadership as the leader in your community. What to do when the fear of COVID-19 keeps patients from getting the vital care they need. That's another horrible unintended consequence of this disease, is that a lot of people are not going into the emergency room when they have a stroke. So how do you let the frontline doctors know about this? How do you get the word out? Not just from a building your business standpoint, but from building your reputation, but as a public service, because this is a real issue. Some of the precautions you're making for immunocompromised patients, if that fits you. The vital role of telemedicine in our specialty. The special needs of seniors struggling in isolation. How do we protect patients who cannot wait for their surgery? Hopefully these are inspiring ideas to you. We're here to help you and your patients. So, reaching out the olive branch to help patients during the crisis. give you some insight. I'm not going to share with you everything we do as a company, clearly, but I can share with you some things that are on my website, maybe give you some context. This, I mentioned earlier, to talk to doctors as though they're real people. This always surprises me. If I were to, whenever I ask doctors and audiences, would you respond to this message of 7 deadly sins? They often say, oh, no, that's too lowbrow. Yet tens and tens of thousands, maybe 100,000 by now, subscribers have downloaded this ebook from this offer. So a lot of times, and we know this because I've tested at least 100 different headlines, different forms of content. I came up with this concept. I had never, people are using it now all everywhere, but when I came up with this was about 15 years ago when I wanted a catchy line to close a seminar, a live seminar I did. I liked it and translated that to an ebook, and it's been successful ever since. So it's funny, some things are evergreen. Anyway, so there's lots of different educational offers that you can provide. So beyond just emailing them with sales updates like I just described, when we go up to the next level in terms of complexity, having a regular blog that is, again, always adding value, offering ebooks, offering webinars, offering white papers, offering podcasts, case studies, video, events. These are all things, and I kind of ordered these in rough order of complexity. I would say ebooks and webinars are the two things that tend to be working the best in B2B and B2D, business to business and business to doctor. So those top three are the most efficient probably for the effort and the impact. Some of the other ones are really strong too for specialized cases. Again, we practice what we preach. Everything I'm teaching you today, we do for ourselves. This is just a snapshot of the landing page for the 7 Deadly Sins of Healthcare Marketing. Notice that we have a strong headline, a strong title. We have directive copy, get advice from top healthcare marketing experts. We have bullet points. We have calls to action. Over here on the right-hand side, we have a form. That's actually called a progressive form. So if we know different information about a prospect reaching out, we'll ask them something else, something new. So these are all sort of standards in marketing. These are things that we would do for any client. And you can get much more sophisticated in this, but this is something that's strong. Notice here too, again, you're all here, right? We must have done something right. The digital marketing reach doctors now, this was our webinar you're on today. Note that these are just examples of different emails we sent out. We tested different emails. We built a sequence for different audiences, different appeals based upon experience. What was intriguing in this particular case, I had a more straight out email like we often do, but I had a second one telling the story of why we're doing this email, and it had massive engagement. So always be testing, always try new things, but the principles are always the same. Another thing to do to build your content, again, this is more at the corporate level, not at the individual rep level, but to consider sponsorships. Now, if you're a much smaller business, you could look at your local and your localized, your local medical association, right? So this idea still could apply to you. But you could think about partnering either as a sponsor with a publication or partnering with an association or corporation to get the word out. This is an example. Some of you may have heard my webinar I did in conjunction with Binary Fountain. Love those guys. Kayla, I think today, that's great. It's a very successful webinar. It's a win-win partner with webinars. I'm doing one with the American Osteopathic Association coming up. I'm doing one for the American Vein and Lymphatic Society coming up. So this kind of partnership can really, really work. And you can sponsor partnerships. For example, medical economics, physicians practice, lots of the former publications do sponsors. There's lots of opportunities there. These offers work really well for webinars and white papers. Again, you get a larger database. You also get a brand halo. It can work for clinical content and management content. One of the great things is when you start doing sponsorships, you can often launch these quickly. You don't have to go build a database of 100,000 primary care doctors. You can reach out to some of these either associations as a sponsor or as a partnership, and oftentimes you can launch very, very quickly. Marketing automation is another key aspect to this. Marketing automation is far more powerful than just simply sending emails. You may have seen different providers out there. They range from very, very simple to very complex. We use several different ones actually for different clients. But the key with marketing automation is it has, true like it says, automation. So it scores, you can put data in to prioritize your prospects, but then based upon their behavior, do they provide data to you? Do they go to services pages? Do they go to a quote page? Do they request a proposal? It actually scores their prioritization based upon their activity with your content, which is fantastic. It can also give reps alerts. Hey, Dr. Smith is on the website looking at your service offering. So we know from experience when we get sophisticated, wow, that's an important page. He must be, or she must be further down the buying funnel. It's time for a call. And this can be extremely effective. It's not easy. It's complicated. A lot of people go out and buy this, spend many thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars setting this all up, and then they just use it like a dumb email that you could have bought for $100 a month. But when it's done right, it's extremely powerful to prioritize your content, alert the reps when they are, the buyers are most interested. And you can even provide content sequences based upon how they behave. So if we find they're lower in the funnel, that would be getting them different content than if they're higher in the funnel. And these systems can either have their own built-in customer relationship management program, or they can integrate. Just as an example for us, I'm going to share a lot of our stuff. We do this for a lot of our clients, but just for confidentiality, I wanted to keep, spend a lot of stuff I'm doing. So if you go to our site and provide a marketing budget, that's a qualifying question because we get dozens of calls a week. We have about 50,000 unique visitors a month to our website. So we have lots and lots of inquiries to our company. And what we wanted to do is spend our time following up appropriately. So we can create these qualifying forms. When they are highly qualified, your salespeople and reps can follow up quickly and appropriately. And we can even send immediate follow-up emails from the rep saying, hey, this is great, good to hear from you. Or if they haven't responded, hey, haven't heard from you, I know inquired before. This will all be automated. Likewise, and this is my team tells me was life-changing for them. If we don't think they're as qualified, we can still be for higher end services or for your A plan, you can still send them something else. So for example, in our case, we have, again, we have great big enterprise readers on our website. We have small mom and pops. When they come back and say, hey, we don't have much budget, we're like, great. Hey, tell you what, we have a low cost website program. We have a seminar. We have a book. You can subscribe for free to our blog. And if you're interested in more marketing than that, just let us know. We're here and happy to help you. So for those are oftentimes passive. We'll let them call us. But obviously, if they're more enterprise, our team will be able to prioritize their time. And so we want to leave everybody better off than before, even if they don't have much budget. We want to help. We just have to do it in a way that makes economic sense for our business. One of the key concepts I want to share with you today is the idea of staying in front of doctors past email. So we're making a huge transition here. So beyond email, the actual email address can be used directly for email, but the email address actually works today as a unique identifier. So you can take that email address, and it's essentially a digital fingerprint that we can use that email address. And when you're working with the right vendors, and again, there's a number of them, we use different ones for different purposes, but you can actually find out, track them as they go online. So when they log into Facebook, they can see your ad. When they go to Instagram, they can see your ad. When they go to Twitter, we can target them through programmatic buying, which is a deeper discussion than I have time for today. Programmatic buying is essentially a bidding war that's happened in real-time bidding online, where you can show up on, websites, New York Times or USA Today or ESPN. You can show up on digital radio, Pandora, Spotify. You can show up on what's called connected TV. So if they're on Hulu, your ads can show up there with video. So it's all done in an instant. This is a really complicated topic, but you can, with programmatic buys, you can show up on, again, paid social, as well as really pretty much wherever they are browsing on the internet, targeting exactly those people. You can target it with NPI. So in the pharma industry, we have compliance issues. So you have, you know who you're going to. And it even can identify multiple email addresses attracted to that same doctor. So most people have 2 or 3 email addresses at least, and some other ones that are inactive. And so it can track multiple email accounts with great certainty that you're reaching the right person when they're at home, when they're at work, when they're on the phone, when they're on their computer. It's a super powerful technology. Just some quick examples of this. I've shared with you some of our stuff. This is just for a recent client. So we had programmatic or display advertising up here, a couple of different display ads. We also had social media ads, paid social. Just a quick example. So with paid social, we are oftentimes doing video. It's extraordinarily powerful as well. Simple videos, best practices. When you're on Facebook and Instagram, they have massive data that we rely on, plus our own testing. So again, super powerful. Oftentimes using these kinds of techniques, driving to different offers. This one happens to be for a podcast. So again, these kinds of techniques are super, super powerful. And essentially, you can later on supplement this back and we can do live events. Let's see if I can get this to work. This was, I'm gonna have to back out here for a second. And technology's always changed, so this is kind of fun if I can get it to work for us here. You can see this is brand new technology that's out there where we have this is for our own company again, where we have just a visual interest, super, super powerful there. Some other quick things you can do online, as people engage with your website, you can retarget them. So as again, they go back to Facebook, Twitter, various places, they can see your message on an ongoing basis. We love these strategies. So you can see this is going from email to a much broader online digital strategy. And then when they get back to it, you can also even geograph or geofence, some of you may have heard of this, mobile app ads around either events or specific locations. So right now there's not too many big events. This is a great strategy for big events. But even like, for example, if you want to target doctors within a specific hospital or specific medical center, you can target very specifically, really not just doctors, but patients, everybody within these larger organizations. So it's another strategy that we like a lot. And again, this gets more complicated. This is why we do, marketing plans for clients. But these are all tactics and strategies that we can bring to bear for you. Obviously, as you do this, you want to make sure you have this all tracked into analytics programs. The great news is there's massive amounts of data that's out there. We have, through our paid advertising platform, when we're working with clients or for ourselves, we have Google Analytics for our website demographics. And then also, of course, the email programs have massive amounts of data. That, when you get into larger campaigns, becomes its own area of expertise. And really, when this really gets powerful is when you start integrating this with what the reps are doing. So, the team, we have some super strong people on our team from pharma, for example. And you would think that, they have huge budgets and, everything's easy for them. But this stuff, the actual doing of this stuff can be difficult, even for larger, more enterprise clients. You can even track phone calls. Again, some of you know this, some of you may not. But pretty much almost everything we do, we track is to death, including actually recording the calls. As long as you have a disclosure, this call may be recorded. We have a HIPAA secure platform, which is relevant to patients. But even on the doctor side, it's a secure platform. You want to make sure you're using secure platforms. So I hit you with a lot. It was, wow, I said 45 minutes and it's 44 minutes and 48 seconds. So Kyle, I know we don't have time probably for all the questions, but if there's a couple of questions we have time for today, and then what we'll do is if anybody has any other questions that you'd like to reach us or reach me personally, this is my contact info. Kyle, do you have any questions?
Yes, we do. We actually have some great questions here from our attendees. So let me start off with the first question. I'll actually answer myself. Yes, we are recording this webinar, and it will be available after the webinar ends. We will email that out to all of the attendees. So thank you for asking that question, Sarah. Really appreciate that. Next question comes from Ginger. She's asking actually a three-pronged question here. But first part is, are you marketing to private physician emails that they can use in and outside of their clinics, or their corporate or clinic emails while they are working?
Okay, so exactly. So that was the thing, is really the answer is both. Typically with doctors, what we find is the following. Most doctors, funnily, or I don't know if funny is the right word, but surprisingly maybe, still rely on their personal email for almost everything. It's funny, you know, when you talk to somebody who's new to this game, will say, oh, those guys must be out of touch. They're still using an AOL personal email address. But guess what? That doctor has been using that AOL address for years. It's his primary email. If you decide naively just to take that off of your list, you're making a big mistake. It's the one that he or she uses. So we see when we look at, it's very different in the corporate world. In the corporate world, most people are using their corporate address, and that's really all they use for corporate. Once in a while, like I personally will forget and send something to on a business matter to, you know, a client on my email address from home, but that's a total accident. So in the corporate world, we use our official corporate address almost always. But doctors, on the other hand, usually have a personal address, they have a corporate address. They may use the corporate address once in a while, but they really prefer their home email address, particularly for communication they want to get. And that's what I was referring to earlier. When you have, and again, it comes down to the quality of the list provider. The people that are at the leading edge of this, and again, I'm not making recommendations on this call because I have friends with a number of them, and we do really recommend different ones for different purposes. You know, when we work with our clients, you know, it depends on what kind of data they're looking for, because there's different ones for different needs. But at any rate, the better vendors that are out there have access, and they know if you're going after neurosurgeons nationwide, they have access to, I don't know, 95% of all neurosurgeons. And usually, you know, an average, one of them just said recently, 2.4 emails per doctor was their average. So if they usually have multiple emails, and that's part of the sexiness of this to me, is that we can target them not just on their official email, which they may never read, but on their, you know, home device when they're reading through Facebook. And I should point out, for the sake of time, I cut it out. Stats on doctors using Facebook. You know, a lot of people think, oh, doctors never do that. They do. They really do. And they, you know, they're human beings like everybody else. So they probably not as much as some other audiences, but absolutely you can reach them on, you know, Facebook, Instagram, all these other places. Next question, Kyle.
Great. Yes, indeed. The next question we have is actually from Lynn, and Lynn is asking, are doctors typically on Facebook or Instagram? What percentage do you reach via those channels?
Okay, I give up. So I will share with you the latest data I have. It's funny, I wasn't going to share this. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen. According to MedData Group, 80% of physicians use Facebook at least monthly, 63% weekly. This is older data. It's probably higher now. This is about 1.5 years or 2 years old. According to the latest data we had from a different source, 40% of doctors are on LinkedIn, and 45% of doctors are active on Twitter at least monthly. So I don't have data in front of me at Instagram. Instagram tends to be younger, but Facebook is surprisingly high. So great. I'm glad. See, Kyle, that's why we hide those slides, just in case we need them.
Just in case. I love that. Let's see. We also have another question too about how do you create an email list in the first place? How do you go about doing that if you've never done it before?
Okay, it's a great question. So again, I'm going to get into an area here that purists, you know, the whole idea in healthcare or in marketing in general, there's a whole bunch of people out there that think that you should never do anything except put out great content and you know, have them find you through paid search or have them find you through SEO. And then someday, somehow, you'll have this great big list of prospects. When you're doing consumer, that is the right way to go. But when you're doing neurosurgeons, 5,000 neurosurgeons, your job is to, you know, interact with neurosurgeons. You have to be more aggressive if you want to be successful, because, you know, you can sit around. I was looking for a photo of a skeleton by a phone with cobwebs for the presentation to show this. I decided not to do it. But you know, it's just not practical to sit around and wait forever on the hope that someday, somehow, maybe, you know, those 5,000 neurosurgeons will all sign up for your blog. So we do like to use inbound marketing. I just showed you a bunch of options. So again, if you're starting out, then you typically, most doctors will give it to you if you ask them, especially if you have a field sales rep. It's hard to know the context of where this question is coming from. But certainly you can ask them for the email address. And you get into areas like, so for example, trade shows, a lot of times, again, the standard is you have to send an email with, they have to opt in twice, which you can do. Some have, in other words, that's opt in on the website, then opt in again by email. We usually go for our opt in, single opt in. They opt in on the website and they're subscribed. And again, there's different philosophies on this, but if you add that extra opt in, then you're going to find that you're going to lose about 30 or 40% right off the bat. And then going back to what I started to say, if you have their email addresses from your reps or from wherever, whatever source, you can email them and then give them an opportunity to opt out. If you're following CAN-SPAM, you're giving an opportunity to opt out at any time. If you're doing so that, especially from the marketing department. On the sales rep level, it's a little different. Again, presumably they know you and they have the opportunity, but I still prefer, if anybody asks me to opt out, I do. One thing that's really important that I did not mention that I should have. So for example, for this particular webinar, Kyle works with me closely on the data side of this, and we sent out, I don't know, again, it's a little different because we've built a database, mostly organically, but also supplemented with some lists. And out of, I don't know, 20, 30,000 emails we sent at least, we had about 18 unsubscribed, 0 spam complaints. It's 0.0.
Yep, that's right.
Everybody is so afraid of annoying people, but if the content is relevant, that's the secret. It's got to be super relevant and useful. If you're, I'm not selling, fake gold watches here or, some voodoo, supplement, for men. I'm selling or promoting free content that's highly relevant to my audience, and we have almost no unsubscribes and spam reports. And again, a lot of those people have opted in, but even those that haven't, tend to stay involved because we provide such good content, and that's really the secret. I got time for a couple more before we have to shut down here, Kyle. I see lots of questions coming in.
Sure. There are a lot of questions here.
And then we'll take it from there.
Okay, I have a couple things. You were just talking about emails, and Gloria asks, what is the average for a good open email rate?
It's a great question. So it varies a lot depending if it's opt-in or not in the topic. So Kyle, like for our list, we did a couple different versions to our database. I think our largest was around 40% open or 30% open on this one.
Yes, that's about right. Yes.
So that's very high. That's a highly qualified audience. Those are, people that follow our stuff. So 40% is super strong. I don't know if you're ever going to see 50% unless maybe they're reaching out to get an ebook they've already asked for. So 40% is super high. On the low side, it can be horrible. Like if you're sending out a bad message to a bad audience, it can be a couple percent or less. So it's a real range. We feel confident when we have our subscriber base. Usually, depending on the audience, it's 25-ish, 30-ish. It's pretty high. But again, we have a track record for this. I mentioned email service providers out there. We've built a reputation over the years doing this, right? And we do this for our clients. So, it makes a big difference. If you're putting out good content, you're following the rules, you know what you're doing. The providers out there trust us, and so we get more of our messages delivered. It's just like SEO. These are long-term endeavors, and it requires expertise to do well. It just does. There's no shortcut to this, unfortunately.
Couple more questions here. Clayton asks, what are your thoughts on fax communication campaigns? Most practices have an e-fax and check it often. I prefer email, but would that work?
It's a great question. So I'm not clear on the latest of this. I've done faxes before and wouldn't put it past doing it again. The first thing to consider with fax is if you go down that route, in fact, again, on different presentations, I have more time. It turns out that I have data somewhere. This was from last year. 90% of doctor offices still use fax. That just shocks me. It just shocks me, but they do. And so fax can work. Recognize that it's not going to be going straight to the doctor. That's number one. It's going to be going to an office person. There was a time when fax was super powerful. The caveat with fax, so again, what I talked about earlier, the principle is test, test, test. One thing that's got to be really clear on the fax does have laws against unauthorized use. So email is a little easier. I should say here very clearly, I'm not giving legal advice to anybody. So there's no, check your attorney for anything to do with marketing. But going back to fax, what I do know is that you have to get explicit opt-in. I would not trust another list provider. I would call the office and ask them for their fax number and still provide an opt-out. You can look this up because for a while there, I don't know if this is still true, but there were trial attorneys out suing people with class action lawsuits for faxes. So if you're an enterprise level player like pharma, you want to talk to your compliance people for sure before you do that. If you're an individual, you still have to be careful.
Perfect. Here's another question here. Can you do business to business and business to consumer marketing simultaneously without spending double? As a specialist, we depend on patients directly as well as on other doctors, gatekeepers, as you had mentioned before. How do you create a strategy where the same content can help both? Do you guys help create gated content? And can you help create a brand name authority marketing, which establishes a specialist as a thought leader and also create an inbound marketing strategy the same way?
Absolutely. So thank you for whoever asked that. I don't want to be too promotional. Remember, this was educational, not content, but let me brag a little. So yes, we do this all the time. We work with, the large number of our businesses are actually specialty practices, oftentimes multi-location, more sophisticated, but smaller ones too. We work with, device, health plans, manufacturers, a pretty broad range, and hospitals. Most of our work is for providers, and this is the world we are in every day. But essentially, when you're doing marketing, we teach this a lot, that there are 6 ways to market any healthcare business, and they are as follows. Number 1, doctor referral building, which is what we've been discussing today. And so doctor referral building can include physician liaisons, creating a database, and from a specialty practice, and then supplementing that with marketing like this. And so what's great is we consult with our clients on, how do you get the ground troops? How do you get the data? How do you get a sales force? Not a huge revenue maker for us, but how could we work with a specialty practice without talking about doctor referrals? And then then we do the digital marketing side for both consumer direct and B2B. And again, for example, pharma, this is often a big issue. Like, how do we go after, help our reps, help supplement our reps' efforts? So we do that. We also do branding, digital or advertising, traditional advertising, and even patient experience work. So 5 out of the 6 categories. The last category, by the way, is PR. For that, we have partners. But those categories, and the way people work with us typically, and going back to your question, is that we write a marketing plan for our clients that's all faceted in all these different issues. And how do we put together, what's our brand? What's special about us? And, we talked about earlier, some of those messages for content that I shared would be appropriate to doctors. There's a corollary for that would be consumer direct. And what we're also seeing, and this is a huge topic that we write about and speak about a lot, is the consumerization of healthcare, where healthcares are greatly moving away from doctor referrals solely and going direct, as you may know. Even when people are being referred by their specialist, they are checking you out online and doing due diligence about 85% of the time. So yeah, that's a big deal, and it should be all integrated. So today, for the purposes of this webinar, we kept it very focused on just digital marketing for doctor referral building. But this is a vast topic, and that's, for the people that are interested in this, that's why we're unique. We're not just a digital firm. We're not just a marketing firm. We really do work integratively. And it's funny, we were just talking about for our own brand yesterday, how we have experience in pharma, device, health plans, practices, hospitals, kind of the whole continuum, and that knowledge base is what we try to bring to bear. So good question. Hopefully that answered your question, not just so much as a promotion, but to give you a better sense of, what's possible. And if you're interested more in that, just reach out to me and we can talk some more. It's 12:01. Anything else that's pressing? Otherwise, we can wrap here, Kyle.
One quick final question here. Let's see. Reed asks, how do you handle marketing to Spanish markets?
So that's a great question. We do that as well. That's really, it's a long question to be answered here. Essentially, the Hispanic market, you have different marketplaces are different, right? So for example, in Miami, you have lots of different backgrounds. You have Puerto Rican or Cuban or Haitian. When you get into, other areas like Southern California, it's mostly Mexican background. But my wife happens to be Colombian. And as you get into multicultural marketing, you just have to recognize that oftentimes the adult children are driving everything for the older parents. And that's number one. Number two, it can't be condescending. I mean, you really need to have a full marketing program specifically for that niche. Again, that's a pretty broad question. If you're interested in talking more about how I can help you on that, I'd be pleased to talk to you. But it really is, and then even the doctors, how do you communicate with the doctors? Most doctors are going to speak English, so that, even if they're Hispanic, so that's not going to be typically a big issue bilingual there. But for the consumers, you just have to understand the nuances of the various markets. One last comment on that that's super exciting for us is that some of our Hispanic campaigns do the best of all because they are underserved by most marketers don't even think of it. And we've had some explosive results going to multicultural campaigns. And multicultural is broader than just Hispanic, right? Asian Americans. Some areas like Brooklyn have, Russian immigrants or all kinds of different immigrants. You need to think through very carefully how to reach those. All right, well, we're past time here. I appreciate our audience. We've had, wow, still super engagement. We have about 2/3 of our audience still here. I've really enjoyed doing this. I shared some secret sauce here I don't normally do. Hopefully you find this relevant and interesting. If you're interested in talking to us more. If you're not, that's cool. Hope you enjoy our blog. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.